I'm 30 years old now, but sometimes when I look back, it feels like my heart never grew past the boyhood days when I first met him. He was younger than me, only a few years, but enough that at the time, I always thought him as a kid from down the street who followed me around. He was quiet, softer than most of the boys in our neighborhood, with a shy smile that made people instinctively want to protect him. I never imagined that one day, protecting him would become my greatest responsibility and my deepest joy. Our neighborhood is small, the kind where everyone knows each other's business, or at least thinks they do. He and I grew up across from one another, always crossing paths, whether it was while playing cricket in the dusty street, sharing snacks bought from the same corner shop, or simply sitting on the low boundary wall outside his house as the sun went down. Back then, it was just friendship, easy, innocent. Neither of us knew that the tiny sparks buried in those small moments would grow into something much bigger, something impossible to ignore. As we grew older, I noticed him changing. His voice deepened, his shoulders broadened, but what struck me most wasn't physical. It was the way he looked at me. There was something in his gaze that lingered longer than friendship should, something questioning, almost hesitant. I'd catch him staring when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Sometimes he'd smile when our eyes met. Sometimes he'd quickly look away. And I realized with a mix of fear and excitement that I was guilty of the same. I can't remember the exact moment I fell in love with him, but I remember how it felt. It wasn't like a lightning strike. It was more like rain soaking into dry ground. Slow, steady, unstoppable. I began to crave his laughter, his presence, the way his voice softened when he spoke only to me. I wanted to be near him all the time. And when our hands brushed one evening as we walked side by side, I swear the entire world tilted beneath me. But love like ours isn't simple. It isn't the kind of love that can be spoken about openly. Not here, not in the home he comes from. His father, stern and unyielding, rules the house like a soldier. He decides when his son comes in, when he goes out, who he talks to. Especially at night, never at night. I remember hearing him shout once when his son was late coming home, his voice thundering so loud the whole street must have heard. That was the night I realized, if what we felt ever became known, it wouldn't just be disapproved of, it would be forbidden. So we hid it. We tucked our love away behind careful smiles and casual words. In the daylight, we were neighbors, friends, nothing more. But when the world grew quiet and the stars were high, that's when the truth burned brightest. I lived for those small hours, those stolen moments. It didn't matter if I only got to see him for a little while. It was enough because it was ours. Sometimes I wonder if love is stronger when it's hidden, when it has to fight for its own existence. Because despite the secrecy, despite the risk, I never doubted it. Not once. Our love lived in the shadows, yes. But somehow, in those shadows, it seemed to glow even brighter, like fire in the dark. And though I could never say it out loud, I knew in my heart he wasn't just a boy from my neighborhood anymore. He was the reason my nights felt alive. The first time he called me past midnight, I almost didn't pick up. My phone buzzed quietly on the nightstand, the screen glowing in the darkness of my room. At first, I thought it was a wrong number. Who would call me at that hour? But when I saw his name flashing, my heart jolted. I answered in a whisper, afraid my own walls might have ears. Are you awake? His voice trembled, soft but urgent. I swallowed, sitting up in bed. Yeah, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong, he said quickly, though I could hear the nervous smile in his tone. I can't sleep. I keep thinking about you. Those words lodged in my chest, heavy and warm. I didn't know what to say at first. For months, our feelings have been a quiet current beneath the surface, never fully spoken, only hinted at in glances and unspoken gestures. But in that moment, at midnight, it was out in the open. Come, he whispered after a pause. Please, just for a little while. My pulse hammered in my ears. His father's strictness was legendary. What if we were caught? But the longing in his voice silenced my doubts. I didn't think. I just found myself pulling on a jacket, slipping my phone into my pocket, and stepping out into the cool night. The street was silent. The neighborhood that always bustled with voices, traffic, children's laughter, was suddenly hushed, like the whole world was asleep except for us. My footsteps echoed softly as I walked, each one quickened by the pounding of my heart. Every shadow felt alive, every flickering streetlight like an eye watching me. But still I walked faster until I reached his house. His window glowed faintly, a sliver of warm light against the darkness. I could see the outline of him moving inside. He was waiting. My chest ached at the thought. I crept carefully along the side wall, the way I had when we were children sneaking around for silly games, except this time the game was something much more dangerous, much more intoxicating. The back door was already unlocked. I slipped in, the hinges creaking softly like they were scolding me for my daring. The house was still. His father must have been deep in sleep. My breath caught as I tiptoed down the hall, the faint hum of the ceiling fan the only sound. Then, suddenly, there he was, standing at his bedroom door. He pulled me inside before I could say a word, shutting it gently behind us. For a moment, we just stared at each other in the dim light of his lamp, as if trying to believe we had actually done this. His eyes searched mine, and I swear the room tilted with the weight of what we were feeling. "I thought you wouldn't come," he whispered. "I couldn't stay away," I whispered back. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy with everything we hadn't yet said. He reached for my hand, his fingers trembling as they laced with mine. I could feel his pulse, fast and unsteady, mirroring my own. He tugged me closer, so close I could feel the warmth of his breath against my cheek. We sat on the edge of his bed, whispering like conspirators. He told me how he felt trapped, how every day he wished he could just be with me without fear. I listened, my heart breaking and swelling all at once, because I felt exactly the same. And yet, in that small room in the quiet of midnight, it felt like we were free, if only for a while. Then it happened. The moment I had dreamed about but never dared to imagine so vividly. His hand cupped my face, hesitantly at first, as if asking for permission. His thumb brushed my cheekbone, his eyes searching mine with such intensity one thought I might forget to breathe. And then, slowly, he leaned in. The kiss was soft, trembling, almost fragile. Our lips touched like two secrets finally meeting in the open. My chest tightened, my heart racing faster than I thought it ever could. I felt the world dissolve. The fear, the risk, the house around us, even the possibility of discovery. All that existed was the warmth of his mouth on mine, the sweetness of his breath, the unspoken promise that lingered in that kiss. He pulled back just slightly, his forehead resting against mine. His eyes were glassy, vulnerable, searching. "I've wanted to do that for so long," he breathed. I smiled, though my throat ached with the weight of emotion. "Me too." The night stretched endlessly after that. We kissed again and again, each one a little less hesitant, a little more certain. We lay side by side on his bed, whispering secrets into the dark, our hands never letting go. Outside, the world slept on, unaware of the fire blooming quietly between us. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. It was ours. And though I knew the danger, knew his father could storm it at any moment, none of it mattered right then. What mattered was that in that still hour of night, for the first time, our love wasn't just a feeling hidden in glances or words left unsaid. It was real, alive, breathing between us in every kiss, every whispered word, every silent promise that this was only the beginning. It didn't stop with that first night. In fact, it felt like something had been unlocked between us, a door that could never be closed again. Almost every night after that, just when the neighborhood had fallen into silence, my phone would light up with his name. Sometimes he didn't even say much on the call, just a soft come, or a quiet, "I miss you." That was enough. I would slip out of bed, dress quickly, and make my way through the sleeping streets to him. Each time was different, yet somehow the same. My heart always raced on a walk over. The air cooler and sharper at night, my footsteps echoing too loudly for my liking. And each time, when I finally stepped into his room, and he closed the door behind me, the fear would dissolve. All that remained was the warmth of him, waiting for me. We built a world in those midnight hours, a world that belonged only to us. We would lie side by side on his narrow bed, the fan turning lazily above us, whispering secrets that we couldn't tell anyone else. He'd tell me about the pressure of living under his father's watchful eye, how suffocating it felt. I confessed my own fears, that one day someone would find out and tear us apart. Somehow, saying these things out loud made them less heavy. Somehow, holding his hand as he spoke made him braver, made me braver too. Often, after talking for hours, we'd fall into a silence that wasn't empty. It was a kind of silence that pulsed with meaning, that made my skin tingle with awareness. In that stillness, he'd turn toward me, his eyes dark and vulnerable, and press his lips to mine. It never stopped amazing me how one kiss from him could undo me completely. My chest would tighten, my body would soften, and I'd feel myself melt into him like I was water and he was the only vessel that could hold me. He kissed with such intensity, like he was pouring everything he couldn't say into that one gesture. And I accepted it, welcomed it, because I felt the same. I'd let my hands rest against his back, his shoulders, the nape of his neck, memorizing every part of him I was allowed to touch. It wasn't about desire in the way people might assume. It was deeper, heavier, almost sacred. Each kiss was a promise, each touch a reassurance. You are safe with me. I am yours. You are mine. There were moments when we'd simply hold each other in silence, his head resting against my chest, listening to the rhythm of my heartbeat. I think those were my favorite moments. The world outside might have judged us. His father might have raged if he knew. But in that small room, I felt an invincible peace. I felt like I belonged, utterly and completely. Yet always, at the edge of that peace, fear lingered. A creak in the hallway, a call from another room, even the sound of the gate shifting in the wind could send our hearts racing. We knew the risk. If his father discovered us, the consequences would be devastating. There were nights when I wanted to leave early, when the weight of that risk pressed down too heavily. But every time I looked at him, at the softness in his eyes, I knew I couldn't walk away. Happiness and fear lived side by side in those nights. It was a strange balance, terror being caught, and yet overwhelming joy in being together. I sometimes wondered if that tension made it all the more intense, if the shadows we lived in sharpened the light of our love. Maybe that's why, despite the fear, those nights became the most precious part of my life. He had a way of disarming me with his words. Too, lying there, staring at the ceiling or the faint patterns of light on the wall, he'd whisper things that made my heart ache. When I'm with you, I don't feel trapped, he'd say. Or, sometimes I wish time would stop right here, right now. And once, his voice breaking, promise me you won't leave me, no matter what. I promised. Over and over, I promised. And in return, he promised me pieces of his heart I'd never dared to hope for. He told me he loved me, not in a loud, dramatic way, but in the quiet moments when it mattered most, like when his lips brushed mine and he whispered it against my mouth, or when his fingers traced the outline of my hand and he murmured, I don't ever want anyone else. It was in those moments that I realized our love was more than secret kisses and midnight calls. It was the anchor holding us steady, the flame that kept us alive in a world that might never understand. It was the safest danger I'd ever known. Every night I left his house, slipping out as quietly as I'd arrived, I carried that warmth with me. My chest would still hum with his kisses. My skin would still feel the echo of his touch. My ears would still ring with his whispered words. I'd walk home in the silence of the early morning, the first signs of dawn just beginning to paint the sky, and I'd think to myself, no matter the risk, no matter the fear, it's worth it, because he wasn't just my neighbor anymore. He was my home. The closer we grew, the more dangerous it became. With every kiss, every whispered promise in the dark, I knew we were walking a thin line. His father's shadow loomed over us, even in the safety of his room. It was as though the walls themselves carried his authority, listening for a sound that would betray us. There were nights when my heart nearly stopped from fear. Once, not long after I had slipped into his room, we heard the creak of footsteps in the hallway. His hand gripped mine so tightly it hurt. We froze, breathing shallow, listening. The sound moved closer, pausing outside his door. I could hear his father clearing his throat, the low growl of his voice muttering something I couldn't make out. My chest burned from holding my breath. Then finally, the footsteps move away. We didn't dare move for long minutes after, lying there as still as stone until we were sure the danger had passed. When I finally looked at him, his face was pale, his eyes wide with terror. And yet, when he leaned in and kissed me with trembling lips, I realized that fear had only made the kiss more desperate, more real. Another night. The front gate slammed loudly against the wind just as we were laughing softly under the covers. His father stirred, shouting something from the other room, and for a split second, panic ripped through us. I scrambled toward the window, ready to slip out if the door opened, but it didn't. The house fell silent again, and I collapsed back onto the bed, my heart hammering so violently I thought it might give me away. He pulled me into his arms, whispering over and over, it's okay, though we both knew it wasn't, not really. These close calls left marks on us. They made us more cautious, more careful with every touch and word. But strangely, they also made our bond stronger. It was as though each time we survived the risk of discovery, we proved something to ourselves, that what we had was worth it, worth the fear, worth the danger, worth every ounce of secrecy. Still, the weight of hiding pressed heavier on my chest as the weeks went on. Sometimes, lie beside him with his head on my shoulder, I'd stare at the ceiling and wonder what we were really doing. Was this love, or was it just a fragile dream we were forced to survive in the shadows? Could it ever stand in the daylight? Do you ever think about it? I whispered one night, about what would happen if your father found out. His breath hitched, his body tense. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, softly, he said, I think about it every day, and it terrifies me. Me too. I turned my head to look at him, the faint glow of the lamp painting his features in soft gold. His eyes were wet, shining. He was trying to be brave, but I could see the fear beneath his skin. But, he added, his fingers sliding between mine, I also think about you, about us, and that makes me braver. The truth was, I didn't feel brave at all. I felt like I was walking on a thread stretched over a fire. Every second was a gamble. But when he kissed me again, slow, tender, full of trembling certainty, I wondered if maybe bravery wasn't about being unafraid. Maybe it was about choosing love even when fear tried to swallow you whole. There were other signs of his father's tightening grip. He started checking the locks at night, making sure no doors or windows could be opened. He shouted more often, suspicious of any noise after midnight. Sometimes I thought I saw him watching his son with narrowed eyes during the day, like he sensed something had changed. Each time I went to his house, I felt the risk sharpening, and yet I went anyway. The secrecy was both a prison and a lifeline. On one hand, it chained us, forcing us into silence, into shadows. On the other hand, it carved out a secret world where our love belonged only to us. Every stolen moment became sacred because it was forbidden. Every kiss became a rebellion. Every whispered, I love you, became a weapon against a fear that threatened to consume us. But the tension was building. I could feel it. The more his father's suspicions grew, the more dangerous our nights became. And yet, the more dangerous they became, the harder it was to stop. I didn't want to stop. I couldn't imagine going back to a life where I didn't have him press against me in the dark, where I didn't fall asleep to the sound of his breathing, where I didn't wake to the warmth of his body curled against mine. Some nights, when the silence stretched long and heavy, I'd ask myself, was our love strong enough to face the world? Could it survive outside of the midnight hours, outside the whispers and shadows? Or would it collapse under the weight of disapproval, crushed by rules we never chose? I didn't know the answer, and maybe that was the hardest part. Not the fear of being caught, but the uncertainty of what would happen after. I wanted to believe that love was enough, that it would carry us through, no matter the storm. But late at night, when my mind was restless and the silence too loud, doubt crept in. Still, when he reached for me, where his lips brushed mine with a mixture of desperation and devotion, all the doubt scattered. In those moments, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. Whatever the future held, whatever risks we faced, I wanted him beside me, even if the world never understood, even if we had to keep hiding. because love, in all its danger, was the only thing that felt true. Daytime was a different world. The same boy who held me in the dark, who whispered, "I love you," against my lips, became just my neighbor when the sun was up. We passed each other in the street, like we always had, our conversations casual and ordinary. If anyone noticed us lingering a second too long, they never said. To everyone else, we were just two men who'd grown up side by side, nothing more. But beneath the surface, every glance was a secret. When our eyes met across the road, there was a flicker that no one else could read, a current running between us. Sometimes he'd smile quickly before turning away, the kind of smile that seemed harmless to others but set my chest burning. Sometimes, when we brushed past each other, his hand would brush mine just briefly, a touch so subtle it could be mistaken for nothing. Yet it was everything to me. We became experts at pretending. Sitting with neighbors, playing cricket with friends, go to market. We played our roles perfectly. I'd talk about work. He'd joke about daily life. And on the outside, it seemed as though nothing had changed. But inside, everything had. Every word was a mask. Every laugh carried an echo of the night before. It wasn't easy. Pretending to be strangers when I had tasted his lips only hours earlier was torture. There were times I wanted to reach for him in the middle of the day, to pull him close and let the world see what he meant to me. But I couldn't. Not here. Not in a place where love like ours wasn't just frowned upon. It was dangerous. And so daylight became a cage. The sun exposed us, left no shadows for us to hide in. I hated how small we had to make ourselves, how careful we had to be. In the night, we were free, even if only within the walls of his room. In the day, we were trapped, bound by the eyes of everyone around us. I remember one afternoon especially. He was standing outside his house, speaking with some relatives who had come to visit. I passed by on my way home, and for the briefest second, our eyes met. He tilted his head slightly, barely noticeable, but it was a gesture only I would understand. "I miss you." I smiled back, the faintest twitch of my lips, and walked on. No one saw it. No one knew. But my heart raced all the way home. It struck me then how much freedom we craved. Not the kind of freedom to travel or to work where we pleased, but the freedom to exist together in the daylight the same way we did at night. To walk side by side without pretending. To hold hands without fear. To love without secrecy. The thought was both beautiful and cruel, because I knew it wasn't something the world was ready to give us. Not yet. Still, those small glances, those fleeting touches in the street, kept us going. They were breadcrumbs that led us from day into night. Every stolen smile was a promise. Wait for me. Tonight, it will be just us again. And when night finally came, the difference was staggering. The world outside melted away. He was no longer the quiet son living under his father's strict gaze, and I was no longer the careful neighbor hiding behind casual words. We became ourselves again, whole, unhidden, raw. I often wondered if people could sense it, if the intensity of our nights left traces on us during the day. Did anyone notice the way my voice softened when I spoke to him? Did anyone catch the way he laughed easier when I was near? If they did, no one ever said a word. Maybe they didn't want to see. Maybe they couldn't imagine. But I knew. He knew. And sometimes that was enough. The daylight world belonged to rules and appearances, to his father's stern voice and the judgment of others. But the night, that was ours. And each time I lay beside him, his head against my chest, his hand in mine, I thought about how strange it was that love could be both the most natural thing in the world and the most forbidden. In the quiet hours before dawn, when I prepared to leave his room and return to the mask of daytime, he often whispered the same thing. Someday, just that one word. Someday, we wouldn't have to hide. Someday, we walk freely in the sun. Someday, the world would be ours too. And though it was only a word, only a hope, it was enough to keep me going, enough to make me believe that maybe, just maybe, our love was strong enough to carve its way from the shadows into the light. That night felt different from the start. The air was thick with the scent of summer rain, the kind that left the streets damp and silent. I slipped quietly into his room, as I had so many times before, but something about the way he looked at me stopped me in my tracks. His eyes weren't just warm, they were desperate, searching, as if he was holding something inside that could no longer be contained. He closed the door quickly behind me, and before I could even speak, he pulled me into his arms. His lips found mine in a kiss so urgent, so full of trembling emotion, that it nearly stole my breath. It wasn't like the quiet kisses we usually shared in fear of being overheard. This one was raw, fierce, overflowed with something deeper than I had ever felt from him before. When he finally pulled away, his forehead rested against mine, his breath uneven. "I can't keep it in any more," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm scared. Every day I think about what will happen if someone finds out. My father, the neighbors, the whole world. I feel like I'm drowning in fear." His hands trembled as they cupped my face, and I could see the tears gathering in his eyes. "But then I think of you, and it scares me even more, because I don't know if I'm strong enough to lose you." My chest ached at his words. I had seen his strength in so many ways, how careful he was, how brave he pretended to be during the day. But this was different. This was the boy I loved, stripped bare of every defense. I pulled him closer, wrapping my arms tightly around him. "You won't lose me," I said firmly, though my own voice wavered. "Not now, not ever. I'm here. Always." He buried his face against my shoulder, and I felt the wetness of his tears soaking into my shirt. I held him through it, stroking his hair, whispering every promise I could think of, that I would stand by him, that our love wasn't something fragile but something unbreakable, that no matter how dark the world felt, I would be his light. When he finally lifted his head, his eyes were shining, not just from tears, but from something else, a kind of determination I had never seen before. "I love you," he said, his voice steady now. Not just in whispers, not just in shadows. "I love you like I've never loved anything in my life. And I don't care how hard it gets. I can't let that go." The weight of his words hit me like fire and water all at once, burning and soothing, terrifying and beautiful. For the first time, I felt the truth of what we had. It wasn't just stolen moments. It wasn't just desire. It was something that already changed us, something that would shape the rest of our lives. I kissed him again, softer this time, letting the moment stretch, letting him feel the depth of what I couldn't yet say out loud. Our hands found each other, fingers intertwining tightly, as if we could hold the world at bay with just our grip. And then, slowly, the urgency gave way to tenderness. We lay down together, the rain tapping gently against the window, the night wrapping us in its quiet embrace. Every touch was deliberate, every kiss filled with meaning. It wasn't just passion, it was reassurance. It was us telling each other with our bodies what words could never fully capture. "I am yours. You are mine. Nothing else matters." His hands traced the lines of my face as if memorizing me, as if afraid I might disappear. I kissed away the tears that lingered on his cheeks, holding him as though he were the most fragile and precious thing in the world. We moved together slowly, carefully, hearts pounding in rhythm, every breath a confession of love. At one point, he pressed his forehead to mine and whispered, promise me we'll find a way, that someday we won't have to hide. I promise." I breathed, "Whatever it takes, whatever we have to go through, we'll get there together." His lips met mine again, and for the first time, I felt no fear. Not of discovery, not of tomorrow, only the certainty that what we shared was worth every risk. Hours passed like minutes. When the world outside finally began to stir, we were still wrapped up in each other, our bodies tangled, our souls laid bare. There was no more pretending, no more wondering if this was just a phase or a secret fling. That night carved the truth into both of us. This was real. This was forever. As I lay there with him resting against my chest, I thought about how everything had changed. We could no longer think of our love as something temporary, something confined to shadows. It was bigger than that now, stronger. It demanded more of us, but it also gave us more than I had ever dreamed possible. I kissed the top of his head and whispered into the early light, "Whatever happens, you'll never face it alone." And for the first time since this all began, I believed it with every part of me. That night wasn't just another meeting in secret. It was a night our love stopped being a hidden flame and became a fire neither of us could ever put out. A fire that, no matter how much the world tried to smother, would keep burning inside us both. It was a night I would never forget. The night we stopped being two people sneaking around in the dark and became something unbreakable. It had been weeks since that night, the night everything shifted between us. Even now, the memory of it lived in me like a spark that refused to fade. Every time I closed my eyes, I could feel the weight of his promises, the way his voice shook with both fear and hope, and the way his kiss had sealed a truth we could never run from. But as beautiful as it was, the silence of secrecy began to feel heavier with each passing day. Every time I slipped down the street at midnight, glancing over my shoulder, my chest tightened. I hated the thought that what we had, this love that felt larger than anything else, was treated like a crime just because of who we were. One night, as I lay next to him, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, I found myself whispering into the dark, "We can't keep hiding forever." His body stiffened, and he turned his face toward me. Even in the faint glow from the window, I could see the fear flicker in his eyes. But he didn't shy away. Instead, he reached for my hand and squeezed it tight. "I know," he said quietly. "Every time you leave at dawn, I feel like part of me breaks. Like I'm losing something I'll never get back." I kissed his knuckles gently, letting the silence stretch before I spoke again. "Then let's change it. Let's dream bigger than this room, bigger than these four walls. What if we could live together? Really live, not in shadows, not in secret." The words hung heavy between us, daring and dangerous. I half expected him to flinch, to tell me it was impossible. Instead, his lips curved into the faintest smile, bittersweet but real. "You mean move away?" "Maybe," I said, my heart racing. "Maybe someday we could find a place where no one knows us, where no one tells us what we can or can't be. Just you and me." He sat up slowly, resting against the headboard, pulling me with him so we were side by side. His eyes were far away, as if picturing a life he had never dared imagine before. "A small apartment," he whispered. "Nothing big, just enough. A kitchen where I can make you tea every morning. A window we can leave open at night, without worrying about who might hear us laugh. A bed where we don't have to whisper." I felt my throat tighten at the simplicity of his dream. Not riches, not grandeur, just freedom, just love without chains. I leaned into him, brushing my lips against his cheek. "That's exactly what I want too. A life where every kiss isn't stolen. Where I don't have to look at the clock before holding you." For the first time, the weight of possibility began to outshine the fear. We talked for hours, voices low but hearts open wide. He spoke about leaving the neighborhood, about finding work far away from the watchful eyes of family and tradition. I told him about the city, about the noise and the freedom, about how no one would care if we walked side by side with our hands brushing. At one point, he turned to me, his eyes wet with unshed tears. "Do you really think we could do it?" he asked. "That we could walk away from everything we've known and still be okay?" I cupped his face in my hands, forcing him to see the certainty in my gaze. We already walked into something people told us was impossible. Look at us now. We found each other despite every wall they tried to put between us. If we can do that, we can do anything. He let out a shaky laugh, one that cracked into something more fragile. Then he leaned forward, pressing his lips against mine in a kiss that felt less like passion and more like a vow. "Then let's promise each other," he whispered against my mouth. "No matter how long it takes, no matter how many nights we spend sneaking around, one day we'll have that life. Our life." I rested my forehead against his, my chest tight with emotion. "I promise." I breathed. "I don't care if it takes years. I'll wait. I'll fight. Whatever it takes, I'll be there with you." The room felt different after that. It wasn't just a hiding place anymore. It was the beginning of something greater, a sanctuary where dreams were born. Every kiss that night was different too. Less hurried, less desperate. They were slower, surer, the kind of kisses that carried the weight of forever. We lay awake until dawn, painting futures with words. He told me he wanted to see the sea someday, to walk barefoot on the sand with no one around to judge us. I told him I wanted to hear him laugh in the middle of the day, loud and unafraid, without the fear of being overheard. As the sky turned pale, I realized something. The fear was still there, yes, but it no longer felt like a chain. It felt like a shadow we were finally ready to walk out of. That morning, when I slipped out of his house, I didn't feel the usual dread pressing on me. Instead, I carried the weight of our promise like a shield. We might still live in the shadows for now, but our future was already waiting for us, bright, open, and real. And no matter what the world said, I knew in my bones I wouldn't trade this love or this man for anything. It's strange how quickly months can pass when you measure time not in days, but in nights together. The seasons shifted quietly. The air grew cooler, and still our rhythm remained. His call at midnight, my quiet footsteps down the street, the soft creak of his door as I slipped inside. But something had changed. It wasn't just a thrill of secrecy anymore, or the fear of discovery. There was a steadiness between us now, a calm strength that neither of us had known at the start. His father's rules were the same as ever, his watchful eyes still sharp in the daylight. But somehow, we carried our love with more courage. We no longer trembled at every sound. We trusted each other, trusted that no matter what, we would protect this bond we had built. And with that trust came a quiet joy. I remember one evening, sitting with him on the edge of his bed, while the rain tapped gently at the window. He leaned against me, his head on my shoulder, and for once we weren't whispering about fear or hiding. We were laughing about something silly I had said, about the way he teased me for always wearing the same jacket, about the dreams we'd spun together of a future apartment with mismatched furniture and a window that looked out onto the world. In that laughter, I realized something. We had stopped seeing ourselves as trapped. Instead, we were simply waiting for the right time, the right chance. But our love was no longer in question. It was no longer something fragile. It was the most certain part of who we were. By day, life looked unchanged. I still walked through the neighborhood as though I were just his old friend. He still greeted me casually if we crossed paths in the market. But in the smallest gestures, our truth lived. A brush of fingers as he handed me something. A glance that lingered a second too long. A smile only meant for me. No one else noticed, but I did, and it was enough. At night, though, everything was ours. The shadows no longer felt like chains. They felt like cover, a gift that let us build a foundation of what would one day be open and free. There was one night in particular I can't forget. He held my face between his hands and said, "I used to think love like this would destroy me, but now I know it's the thing that saves me." His words sank deep, and I knew he was right, because in all the fear, all the secrecy, love had never once felt like a burden. It had felt like breath itself, like the very reason my heart kept beating. We didn't run away. Not yet. Life was complicated. Responsibilities still held us here, but neither of us minded anymore. What mattered was that we had each other, and that one day the promises we whispered in the dark would bloom in the light. Months later, I still found myself lying awake some nights, listening to him breathe beside me, wondering how something so forbidden could feel so right. And every time, the answer was the same, because it was real, because it was ours. I began to see the future not as a dream, but as a certainty. I could picture him unlocking the door to a place of our own, dropping his bag on the floor, and falling into my arms without fear. I could imagine us sitting by the window with coffee in the morning light, no longer glancing over our shoulders. That vision didn't frighten me anymore, it guided me. For now, though, I was content to hold him in the hours we had, to feel his kisses trace away the loneliness of the world, to wake in the soft gray of dawn and know I was not alone. And in those quiet moments, I understood something deeper. Freedom isn't only about where you are, it's about who you are with him. Even in secrecy, I felt freer than I ever had in my life. As I write this, I can still feel the warmth of his hand in mine, the unspoken promise in every touch. We may not yet stand fully in the open, but we no longer live in fear. Our love is steady, unshaken, alive. No matter what tomorrow brings, I know we will face it together. because no matter the hour, midnight or morning, I knew I had found my forever in him.